ever get that feeling? Like
Yeah.
you're totally working against yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You set a goal and then, bam, you're doing the opposite of what it takes to get there.
Self-sabotage. It's a real thing.
Yeah. And that's what we're going deep on today, trying to understand this whole self-sabotage thing.
And we've got Brianna Wiest's book, The Mountain Is You, to guide us. Because, it's easy to just say, stop self-sabotaging.
Right. But like, how? How do you actually do that?
Well, that's where Wiest's book gets really interesting. She says the biggest obstacle isn't out there in the world. Like it's not bad luck or other people holding us back.
It's us.
It's internal. We create this metaphorical mountain for ourselves,
Yeah.
all those internal barriers.
I love that visual of the mountain. It's like, what are the things that keep us stuck? Our fears.
Exactly. Fears, limiting beliefs, all those things. And even those desires we have, they're unconscious sometimes, but they clash with what we say we want.
Oh, so I might say, I want to start a business, but then...
But then deep down, you're terrified of failing. So that fear, it becomes part of your mountain.
It's like that conflict between what I want to do and what I'm afraid of. And that keeps me stuck.
And when we get stuck, that's prime time for self-sabotage to kick in.
So we're talking procrastinating on that business plan.
Maybe even picking fights with our partner, even when they're trying to be supportive. It's crazy. Like we're subconsciously creating detours on our path.
It's like a part of us just doesn't want to succeed, which is so weird.
Well, it's not that simple. It's not that we don't want it. It's more like those unconscious fears and desires, they can be so powerful.
And they totally hijack our actions. But okay, if this mountain, these obstacles, if they're internal, does that mean we're stuck with them forever?
No, not at all. That's actually the most empowering part of this whole thing. Because the mountain is you, that means you can change it.
Okay, so how do we even begin? How do we even start to figure out what our personal mountain looks like?
Wiest says it's all about those emotional triggers.
You mean like the things that set us off, like anger?
Anger, sadness, anxiety, even avoidance. It's like our mountain is sending up flares to show us where the problems are.
Hold on. So those times I'm snapping at my coworker or feeling overwhelmed.
Those aren't just bad moods, they're clues.
Clues to what?
Clues to what's going on deeper down. It's like your subconscious is sending you a message. Don't beat yourself up about it.
So like instead of freaking out about being annoyed that my partner's leaving dishes everywhere,
Ask yourself, what's this feeling really about? Maybe it's not actually about the dishes.
maybe it's about feeling like my boundaries aren't being respected.
Right. Or maybe it's a pattern, attracting people who just don't get it.
Oh, wow. So these triggers aren't just random annoyances. It's deeper than that. It's like these patterns playing out. What about those times when we're not like outwardly freaking out, but we're still not making progress on our goals? Like,
Yeah.
what's happening there?
Good question. Sometimes self-sabotage is less about, those big emotional outbursts and more about a constant feeling. Like you're never satisfied, never quite good enough.
And that's self-sabotage.
It can be. And it might just be dopamine at work.
Dopamine, the feel-good chemical. Wait, what?
Well, it's not really about feeling good as much as it's about wanting more.
Yeah.
Dopamine is that driving force behind the I'll be happy when.
I get it. It's like you achieve a goal, you get that promotion, you buy that new thing, there's that rush, you feel great for a second.
And
then
then you want the next thing.
that feeling of like never being satisfied, always chasing the next thing.
Exactly. And it's like this sneaky form of self-sabotage.
Because we keep moving the finish line. We never really let ourselves arrive. So if dopamine is part of how we're wired, how do we deal with that?
That's where emotional intelligence comes in. It's not just about understanding our emotions.
It's about managing them so they don't end up controlling us.
Right. That brings us to another big idea from the book, microshifts. It's this idea that lasting change, it doesn't happen overnight. It's not some big burst of motivation.
So it's not like I'm changing my whole life starting Monday.
Nope. It's about those tiny, consistent changes over time.
This I can get behind. Small, manageable tweaks.
Right. Instead of, I'm going to meditate for an hour every morning, start with 5 minutes. Instead of cutting out sugar completely, maybe swap soda for water with one meal. Baby steps.
Build up that emotional intelligence muscle one tiny rep at a time.
Exactly. Those small changes add up. They create momentum. It's like climbing a mountain.
One step at a time.
Yeah.
Not just reaching for the peak in one giant leap.
And it's not just about getting to the top. It's about enjoying the process of getting there. And it's about more than just surviving. It's about thriving.
Okay, so much to unpack here. I think we need to take a deeper dive into this whole emotional intelligence thing in part 2.
Absolutely. We'll break it down, get into some strategies.
So if you're ready to tackle your mountain, stick with us for the next part of this deep dive.
So, welcome back. Picking up where we left off talking about Brianna Wiest's The Mountain is You and self-sabotage. Remember how we were talking about that feeling of never having enough?
That constant chase for more, yeah. Like that I'll be happy when trap we all fall into.
And how it might be dopamine that drive for more, not actual
And
satisfaction.
it's like we're on a treadmill, right?
Yeah.
Going and going, but not really getting anywhere.
Exactly. And that's where emotional intelligence becomes so important.
Because it helps us get off the treadmill.
You got it. It helps us step back, actually enjoy the view.
Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah.
But what does that even look like? Like, what does emotional intelligence actually mean in real life?
So Wiest breaks it down into these different parts: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation,
Okay.
empathy, and social skills, too. These aren't just like woo-woo concepts. They're practical skills you can actually learn.
So it's like building a mental toolkit to handle our emotions better.
Exactly. Let's start with self-awareness. What does that even mean? It's all about understanding your own emotional world, being
Yeah.
able to say, okay, this is how I'm feeling. Why?
So instead of just reacting automatically, you pause.
You take a second to check in with yourself. What's going on here? That pause, that's where the magic happens.
Because then you can choose how you respond.
Right. Not just react impulsively. What about when you feel like you're going to lose it, like totally overwhelmed?
Oh, yeah. Those moments are the worst.
That's where self-regulation comes in. It's like,
Yeah.
how do you manage those big, intense emotions?
Not let them completely take over.
Exactly. And it's not about ignoring those emotions. It's about finding healthy ways to work through them.
To like deep breaths.
Deep breaths, mindfulness, journaling, talking to a therapist, even just taking a break to cool down before you react.
It's like having a whole toolbox of strategies.
Right. You find what works for you. And remember, those big emotions, they're usually trying to tell us something.
Instead of freaking out, we should get curious about them.
Exactly. What's this anger trying to tell me? What need isn't being met?
Hmm. Let's talk about motivation for a second.
Yeah.
And not just any motivation. We're talking about intrinsic motivation.
It's that drive that comes from inside you. When you do something because you genuinely enjoy it.
Oh, like going to the gym because you actually like to move your body, not to impress someone?
Perfect example. And intrinsic motivation. That's what helps us reach those long-term goals. Because when you're passionate about something, you're more likely to stick with it.
But not everything we have to do is fun,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Right.
I'm never going to be excited about doing my taxes.
True. But Wiest says you can try connecting those tasks to your values. Like maybe doing your taxes isn't exciting, but it's a step towards financial freedom.
Ah, so find the deeper meaning behind the action.
Yeah, your why. It makes it more meaningful and more sustainable. It's like you're not just checking things off a to-do list. You're taking purposeful action.
Okay, this is making a lot of sense. But what about those times when we mess up? Like we inevitably slip up, get off track.
That's where self-compassion is so important. You've got to be kind to yourself, especially when you make mistakes.
Not beat ourselves up about it.
Exactly. It's about learning from those mistakes and moving on. Self-compassion helps us see challenges as opportunities to grow, not failures that define us.
It takes the pressure off so we can be more resilient when things get tough.
And it helps us break free from that negative self-talk that keeps us stuck. So we've covered a lot about the inner workings of our minds.
We have. And how to use that to create change.
But there's one more big piece we need to talk about. Habits.
Oh, yeah. Those deeply ingrained habits and beliefs, they can feel impossible to change. Welcome back. It's the final part of our deep dive into The Mountain is You, and we're really getting into the nitty-gritty today.
We've talked about all those feelings that lead to self-sabotage, right?
Yeah, all those triggers, the dopamine thing, wanting more, more, more.
And how emotional intelligence can help us deal with all that inner stuff. But now we're going to talk about something a bit more concrete.
Habits.
You got it. Those behaviors that can sometimes feel like they're totally in control.
Because even when we understand why we self-sabotage, actually breaking those habits, that's hard.
It is. But remember how we talked about those micro shifts? Small changes that can have a big impact over time.
Yeah. So we can use that for habits too, even the ones that feel impossible to change.
Exactly. Wiest calls it habit restructuring.
Okay, so how does that work? Where do we even start?
You start by figuring out which habits aren't working for you anymore. Which ones are keeping you from reaching your goals?
Procrastination for some people.
Maybe people-pleasing for others. or constantly comparing yourself to everyone else.
Got it. Get real with yourself about what's not working.
And once you know what those habits are, you can break them down, figure out what triggers them.
So, like, if I'm always procrastinating on big projects,
Ask yourself, why? Is it because it feels overwhelming? Are you scared of failing? Maybe you just don't know where to start.
so it's not just stop procrastinating, it's why am I doing this?
Right. Get curious about what's going on under the surface, because once you understand that, you can start to create better habits.
So if it's because I feel overwhelmed, maybe I need to break things down to smaller steps.
Exactly. And if it's fear of failure, maybe you need to celebrate those small wins. Focus on progress, not perfection.
Okay, that makes sense. But changing habits is hard. Even with good intentions, it's easy to get discouraged. How do we stay motivated?
One thing that helps is focusing on the positive impact of changing that habit. Think about how it will help you reach your goals.
So if I'm trying to stop staying up late scrolling through my phone,
You might remind yourself, hey, if I get enough sleep, I'll have way more energy during the day. Think about how much better you'll feel.
that's a good one. And finding someone to keep you accountable can help too, right?
Definitely. Sharing your goals with someone, having that support system, it can make a world of difference. You know, this whole conversation about habit restructuring,
Yeah,
it's not just about fixing problems, it's about creating a life that feels right for you.
I love that. So it's not just dicking bad habits, it's replacing them with ones that support what you truly want.
Yes. And it all comes back to that image of the mountain, right?
We have the power to overcome those obstacles.
And create a life where we can truly thrive. We've covered so much in this deep dive. It's been great. We talked about all those sneaky ways we self-sabotage.
We explored how to build emotional intelligence, how to change those stubborn habits.
We've given you a lot to think about. But remember, Brianna Wiest reminds us that healing is about embracing imperfection. So be kind to yourself on this journey, okay?
That's a great reminder. And as you go about your day, I want you to ask yourself, what's one small step I can take today to start climbing my own mountain?
Maybe it's restructuring a habit, challenging a limiting belief, or just taking care of yourself. Remember, the journey starts with a single step.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.